All right, and we're back with chapter 8, and this is the last part. Yay! Um, so let's kind of talk about where we are currently in this country economically. We are uh, a system of mass consumption and, well, because if you have mass consumption, mass production. So 66% of all economic activity in this country is people buying goods like phones and TVs and shoes and shirts and uh, fast food, mass consumption. It's not big, huge boats being built for international trade. It's not major airlines. We do that. But two-thirds of our economy is for the average everyday consumer. The stuff that you can go to the store and buy, as long as you have the money, right? Well, to do this with consumer spending, a couple things become very, very important in our economy. And the first thing is advertising, because if you go to the grocery store, right, and you look at soup, you just want a can of soup. How many different brands of soup are there in a can? How many different types of chicken soup? Chicken noodle, chicken star, hearty, homey, healthy, low fat, low sodium, old style like grandma makes, all these different things, right? When you go to buy clothing, how do you know what to buy? Obviously, you know your size. But advertising tells us what's out there, it tells us what's available, it tells us if something's new or improved, it drives interest. Some would say that advertising actually creates the interest that isn't there. It's hard to understate how prevalent advertising is in everything we do. And if you don't believe me, next time you go onto any kind of social media platform, look for the advertising. Do you guys know that when you do a Google search, you type in shoes, and the very first thing that comes up is an ad for a shoe store or a shoe company, and they pay for that. They want to be the first search result. I mean, that's advertising. Um, Many times you watch a movie and they're drinking Coca-Cola very prominently, or they're doing that, right? um, Advertising. Another thing is consumption means status. What you consume defines you. So I'm going to talk about this idea of bling, right? What is bling? And bling is what they call conspicuous consumption, big and flashy. If you buy a car that is extremely big, maybe bigger than you need, and it's got a lot of chrome or a big stereo, something that is not just functional, but it does more, that tells us a little bit about you, doesn't it? If you see somebody driving a BMW or a Mercedes, what do you think about them? What do you think about their status? Do you think they are just some everyday guy, or maybe they're a doctor? Maybe you think they're a jerk because they're driving too big of a car? Whatever. But consumption is often seen as status, right? But to afford all this, you need to have credit. Because very few people, even the most wealthy, have enough cash on hand to buy everything in cash up front. So people take out loans for houses and for cars. People get credit cards for shopping, for clothes and for going shopping. And most of us, even for our phones, right? To have the newest phone, most people can't afford an $800 to $900 phone at once. So you just sign a yearly contract for T-Mobile and you pay them a little extra every month, right? You need to have access to credit. And so to have that, you have to have a very strong, well-established banking system. And the last thing, in this system of mass consumption, who really drives the markets? It's the retailers, the people that sell. So think about the effect that Target and Walmart and Home Depot and Menards and Lowe's has, the big box stores where people go to shop. If Target decides to pick up someone's product and sell it and market it and push it, that's going to make its consumption rise to the roof, right? It's not so much about the actual brand anymore as to where do they get sold, okay? So we're going to end up with talking about economic geography. Where did it begin to where we are now? So the very first aspects of economic geography, we're more concerned with things like where are factories located and why are factories located there. But this was based on the idea of perfect economic rationality. In other words, people are going to do things economically that makes the most sense, economically, logically, rationally. But how many of your products that you own are rational? In other words, do you own a piece of clothing because you like the color or the person on it or the team that's on it? That's an emotional affection. A perfectly logical shirt would be the cheapest shirt you could find, right? How often do you buy something or pay more for something else, or taste, you know? So people do not always make decisions logically; they make things emotionally. And so, in that aspect, economic geography is just this complex part of the larger human society. If we had a completely logical society, we would not have neighborhoods where the value is less 2 miles where the value is higher. That's not logical. That's emotional. Okay? And so that leads us to this new economic geography, which is kind of what I've been talking about. And this kind of comes from geographers like Harvey, that we are actually operating in a Marxist political system. And all that means is that economic class, the role of money in your life, is a part of the lens as well. So rich and poor neighborhoods exist because of the inherent contradiction of capitalism. Feminist perspectives are also added. And so I talked earlier about gendered jobs. So a feminist economic geographer would study, why do certain industries have a predominantly feminine workforce, like childcare or house cleaning, and how does that affect the economic relationships to other areas? Because we find in this country specifically, and many others, that jobs that are somewhat seen as a woman's work, like cleaning and childcare, are paid less than men's work. So a childcare worker at a daycare is paid less than a teacher in a school. They are both watching children and both taking care of children, but there's this different stigma to it. So there we go. Again, these are some good models. I know this was a long chapter and there was a lot to look at, but come back to these when it comes back for your final. And thank you for sticking around for Chapter 8.